Hi, this is Davis Jenkins from the Community College Research Center at Teachers College, Columbia University. Strategy Labs has asked me to give a brief overview of the guided pathways model for helping students get through college more expeditiously. So I'm going to briefly go through some of the research that colleges and researchers like our team have done on the pathways that students have taken through college, and how this research has led folks to think about organizing programs and support services in a different way in this guided pathways model. And I'll contrast how the guided pathways model differs from the conventional approach. I'll give some specific examples that you can look into further, and then I'll just at the end talk about some of the research that underlies some of the key design principles of this approach. So I'm going to run through some slides here. The basic argument is under the prevailing model by which many colleges, especially community colleges and broad access universities are organized. Students are in a lot of ways left to navigate a complex and often confusing array of programs and courses and support services, mostly on their own. They're given a lot of choices, and they get confused. A growing number of colleges and universities are recognizing this, and they're taking a different approach. Instead of letting students find their own path through college, they're creating what might be called guided pathways for students. And they're doing this by redesigning their program offerings to simplify student choices, create more highly structured programs with default schedules and program maps that lead toward help students make better choices that enable them to get toward their end goals more quickly, but to do so in a way without limiting students' options. And a key part of this key part of this approach is really to start with the end in mind, not just the student's goal of earning a degree, but earning a degree that enables them to prepare for further education and advancement in the labor market. So the idea is to start with the requirements for further education and labor market advancement and build the programs backwards, if you will, and then provide support to students along the way. That's the basic idea. So like I was saying, this thinking has come out of efforts by colleges and researchers to look at the pathway of students as they go through college, from the time they say, hey, I might want to go to college, to when they apply, to when they enter college and take those first set of courses. A lot of the research and focus, justifiably, has been on this front end, helping students get in the door. And in community colleges especially, there's been a lot of focus on remedial education and whether that helps students prepare for college. But more recently, in a lot of our work, we focused on what happens also when students start to get into college and make progress, and then what's here called completion, but we really mean not just what happens when they complete, but what happens afterwards, and where are they going in terms of further education and labor market advancement. Now, a lot of the research has been done on colleges sort of as general entities, but we know they're very complex, and more the focus is on not just getting into college, but getting into specific programs of study, because that's an area where students sort of get tripped up, and then not only entering the program, but successfully completing and moving on toward further education and employment. So just a thumbnail sketch of what all this research tracking students' pathways has led us to conclude. You could see sort of lost in the maze is the headline. Many students come without clear goals or plans for college. If they're first-generation students, it's very likely. And part of the issue is that many students don't even know what the options are. And again, how could they? College can be a place where students are helped to explore their options. Many students though in community colleges and broader access four-year institutions have to go into developmental education. And what we find is that in general, rather than helping build skills for college, developmental education, again, as it's practiced in the main, really diverts students and doesn't help them get on a college track and does very little to help them explore the options for college. And as a result, many students are discouraged and don't stay around long. We find many students in community colleges and more open access universities, staying around for a term or two and they're gone. And when I mean they're gone, I mean they're not transferring to other institutions. They're gone from the higher ed scene. And so this is a concern. We're losing a lot of students on the front end. Among students who do stay around, we find that their enrollment patterns are as my colleague Peter Cross described, chaotic. They're not necessarily following the catalog. They're taking courses that don't necessarily count toward their degree or that would be accepted for transfer if they're community college students wanting to transfer. And we see a lot of swirling where students are not only going full-time one semester, part-time the next, stopping out for some semesters, but also attending multiple institutions simultaneously. And so it's a very complex pattern. Among community college students who transfer to four-year institutions, most do so without earning an associate degree, despite research that we and others have done suggesting that getting an associate degree actually improves your chances of getting a bachelor's degree. But maybe more importantly, because many students who go on to try to get a bachelor's degree don't get it or don't get it right away, if you haven't gotten your associate degree before you transfer, you end up with nothing, and you therefore lose the labor market benefits and the other benefits that come with having an associate degree. Many students are deciding on their major very late in the game, or they change majors. I'm less, based on our research, less concerned about students changing their majors than students who generally are just sort of wandering around without a clear goal. But on the other hand, if students change their majors late, then it's problematic. They may have to take new courses to satisfy a new major. And as we'll discuss in more detail, many students are taking more credits than college credits than they need to graduate. So let me just go a quick example looking at community college students transferring to four-year institutions. I'm looking at this example because it involves two- and four-year institutions, but also because in this interest nationally in helping more students complete in terms of numbers, complete degrees, this may be an area where there's the biggest potential. Of the nearly 1.5 million students who enter higher ed through community colleges each year, 80% say they intend to get a bachelor's degree. However, 5 years later, only a fifth of the students, or about a quarter of those 80% who said they want a bachelor's degree, actually transfer. And of those, we see that only a third get an associate degree before they transfer. And then 6 years later, of all those 1.5 million students, only about 15% earn a bachelor's degree. And when we look at the experience of these students coming in, they know they want a bachelor's degree, but they really have don't have a clear idea what that means. And college advisors will say, well, you should get your general education requirements out of the way. And general education requirements are basic liberal arts and sciences courses, usually in these distribution areas. And here's an example of listing of the basic liberal studies requirements from a college catalog. And as you can see, it's very hard to understand. Don't spend a lot of time reading it because you won't understand it. I don't. And also hard to understand are the requirements for transfer. Here's again from a catalog. If you're interested in business, it just is a listing of courses and doesn't, there's probably there is a lot of potential in all of these courses, but it doesn't show how they hang together and sort of what you need to get into these courses and then where they lead you. So as a result, the research we and others have done on students and their experience of transfer is we find that they're very confused about programs and program requirements. And oftentimes, because it's confusing, students, like I said, are taking courses that don't that while they may transfer for credit, don't transfer toward credit toward a particular major. And this is a big difference. So you may be able to transfer your credits for elective credit, but they may not transfer toward credit to business, where you have to take certain prerequisite business courses, but also certain types of math. And you may have taken the wrong kind of math if you wanted to major in business. And so all this means, though, is that so this highlights, though, the importance of students deciding on their major, or at least a broad program area, soon. But unfortunately, we find that many students do that too late, and then once they get to the transfer situation, they find out that what they've taken doesn't transfer. And as a result, they take credits in excess of what they need. They lose time and money. A lot of times the students blame themselves, and this may be because many of these students coming from community college have not had strong education, don't believe that they're strong learners, and their difficulty navigating the system sort of confirms this for them, which you know, is that's not what we want college to do. We want college to be able to expand students' opportunity, not, you know, reinforce this idea that they're not college material and strong learners. This is I want to talk just briefly about the excess credits because it's a big concern not just to students but to states and policymakers, because, you know, if students are taking credits they don't need, those are being paid for by the student and subsidized by the state. And so a lot of policymakers have been interested in this. The Complete College America, in the states that they work with, they find that the average number of credits students take for an Associate of Arts, which typically requires around 60 to 65 credits, is 79 credits. The bachelor's degrees in these states, students who've gotten them average about 137 credits, even though in general most bachelor's programs require around 120. And Florida State was one of the pioneers of this guided pathways approach, and they came to this in part because they were facing problems of excess credits. And so they tried a number of, this was in the late 90s, and Larry Abelli, who was the provost then, was sort of spearheading a lot of this. But they found that a lot of students who were graduating with bachelor's degrees were taking excess credits. And so they tried a number of solutions. They found that many students couldn't enroll in the courses they needed them when they needed them. So they did demand analysis, you know, using statistics and computers to try to optimize scheduling for students. And what they found was a small improvement in retention and graduation, but interestingly, they found no reduction in excess credits among graduates. They found, as I've been saying, that students lack a clear path to graduation, and so they introduced maps for all majors of the courses that students should be taking. Again, they found slight improvement in retention and graduation, but no reduction in excess credit hours. The reason for this is because even though they had maps and the advisors were advising them to follow the maps, students, being students, did not often took courses that weren't on the map. And it was only when they made the maps more of a default, they created milestone or critical courses that students had to take in a particular term, or at least in a particular sequence, in order to stay on track. And if they didn't take that course, then a hold was placed on their registration until they talked with a faculty or an advisor who could see why they weren't on path. And for students coming in who did not have know what their major is, they created required exploratory majors in broad areas of interest like business or social behavioral sciences or health care, where students are required to go through this exploratory curriculum that allows them to take courses in the particular area of interest, but also take other courses as well. And students are required to go through a planning course where they're helped to create a plan for their college and careers. And after 2 or 3 terms, depending upon the field, they have to either decide on a particular major in that field or switch to another field, as some students do, and there are protocols for switching. But the key thing here was that from the start, students were required to choose a broad area. And even though they were allowed to switch to another if the first area didn't suit them, they could that allowed them to explore, but in a very structured way. And once they created these default maps and the exploratory majors, they saw a very significant 6 percentage point increase in retention and a 17 percentage point increase in 4-year graduation rate, and from 44% in 2000 to 61% for the 2009 cohort. And they saw a very significant reduction in the number of students with excess credits from 30% to less than 5%. So this has led people to colleges and universities to really rethink how they design programs and supports, starting with creating very clear roadmaps to student end goals, starting in broad fields, but then getting in specific majors, to create default whole program schedules. And by default, that is, the student is given this as a default. They're able to opt out, they're able to customize their program, but rather than allowing the student to put their program together, it gives them the program and then allows them to customize. But if they customize, they have to do it based on certain rules and in conjunction with advisors and faculties. And the whole program, not just the initial term or two, is laid out so that students can see the full scope of what they have to do. The intake system orientation is designed more as an on-ramp to a program of study with the goal of helping students choose a program of study. And students are required to create a plan. And for students who don't know what they want to major in, they're create these exploratory majors, or what are sometimes called meta majors, that help students explore a particular area in a structured way and decide whether they want to major in that area, specialize in that area, or switch to another field, but do so in a way that they minimizes their loss of credit and also encourages them to make the decision, though. Students' progress is tracked electronically, and advising is reorganized so that when students fall off track, and they get regular feedback on their progress, but when they fall off track, when they're not taking courses on their path, when they fail critical courses, there's protocols for helping support them. So a key to this is the academic map. This full program, here's an example of part of one, and has 4 essential parts. The first talks about what the field is, in this case criminology, criminal justice, and what the requirements are. Many students are interested in whether in the amount of math that is involved that is required for a particular program. Then there's a sample default schedule. This only shows 2 terms, but it lays out the full program, all terms involved in the program. And then there are these milestones that identify these critical courses that if you're not passing, so if you're not passing LS Math with a grade of 2.0 or better, you're not on track for on-time graduation, and your probability of getting a credential in this field is limited. So this warrants an intervention where we work with you to either figure out how you can pass this course to provide you with the student with the support to do that, or maybe decide that another major is more appropriate. And then very importantly, not shown here, but is where all this program leads to in terms of jobs and further education at the next level. So here's a specific example, again, just part of an example from Arizona State, which has a very elaborate system for their more than 300 majors, tens of thousands of students. This is an example of a degree map for a BS in forensic. And this only shows 4 terms, but the full map shows the entire, if you scroll down, this is just a screenshot, but if you scroll down, it would show you the entire 8 terms involved. And these little diamonds here with the exclamation points are the critical courses that you have to take and pass in these sequence. And if you're not passing Bio 181, again, the advisors and the departments intervene and either help you pass that, or recognizing that students who don't pass this have very little chance of getting a bachelor's of science in forensics. They say, well, maybe you need to select another major. So students early, rather than waiting till student has tried to over and over try to take this course, the student has a very clear sense of, and the college has a very clear sense of where the student is and what they need to move ahead. So not only does Arizona State have these program maps for every major, they have these exploratory majors, like I mentioned in connection with Florida State, that are required of students who haven't chosen a particular major. So they have education, health and life sciences, humanities, fine arts, STEM fields, social and behavioral sciences, and pre-engineering. Very broad fields that have a map and that allow students to explore these fields and decide whether they want to specialize or move on. But the key point is you can't be undecided. From the start, you have to choose one of these broad areas, and you can switch. But this really encourages the students early on to think about what their goals are, and they're provided with assistance in creating those goals. Here's an example from the City College of Chicago, where entering students are now required to choose one of 10 focus areas, each one geared toward one of the key areas of occupational demand in Chicago and the region, each one having an exploratory piece as well as default maps both to jobs and to transfer opportunities in the particular field. So that from the start, there's this strong focus in, it's very clear that students are required to start thinking about where am I going both in terms of my career and in terms of further education and transfer. And within these areas, you can drill down and see maps that are somewhat like the Arizona State map I showed, where they lay out specifically the courses that students need to take. And this better enables the colleges to track students' progress along. By knowing where students are coming through the pipeline, it also makes scheduling more predictable, and so there's greater potential to provide block scheduling, or at least more consistent scheduling, so that the city colleges will have schedules several terms out, because they'll know what a student's program is. And so the theory behind this more consistent block scheduling is that students will be better able to manage their childcare and their work around school, rather than not knowing what their schedule will be until the next term begins. So I just want to conclude by talking about some of the evidence to support, the research evidence to support this broad, this approach, which as you can see is a very broad approach. It's not a particular intervention like a learning community. It's a way of redesigning programs and support services in a systemic way. But behind these ideas are, solid research, rigorous research that support these. The first I talked a lot about was looking at the student pathways and how crazy chaotic it is. The second area of research supporting this comes out of behavioral economics and psychology, the idea that people are better or able to achieve things they want if they have a clear map, that people make better choices if they at least have a default that they can opt out of. And if they're required to make a choice, like as in Arizona State or City College of Chicago, where students are required to choose an exploratory major or focus area from the start, helps them, even though they can change, it helps structure very complex decisions. This has advanced, now there's research from K-12 and others, other areas, including higher ed, suggesting that that not only is this greater structure important for students' progression, but it also makes for better teaching. That students learn better when there is what is called instructional program coherence. That is, the program hangs together toward a common set of learning outcomes, that the faculty are working together to gear their teaching toward that, and where the learning, especially of foundation skills, is contextualized to that particular program area. And that gets us to the final area of research on organizational effectiveness, which finds that if you want to make big improvements in organizational performance, whether it's a hospital or a university or a community college, you really have to fundamentally change how you do things. And in particular, align the organizational practices toward the end goals. And one of the arguments we make is that colleges, because of our history, especially community colleges and broad access, are designed to provide broad, low-cost access to higher education. They've been less well-designed, and they've done that very well. They've been less well-designed to help students get on a coherent program of study that, as quickly as possible, helps them achieve not just taking courses, but achieving the competencies they need to advance to further education, whether that be the bachelor's level or the graduate level, and advance in the labor market. To bring this about, to bring about this kind of organizational change, really involves a change in culture, and key to this is really every college and university that has done this successfully has broadly engaged the faculty and advisors and others in this process, and having to convince them that there's a need, but also convincing them that this different way of doing things is working for students. I encourage you to check out the Strategy Lab site for more resources on and examples and work going on, and what to us is a really exciting and promising area of reform in higher education. Thanks for your time.